All right, Matthew, welcome to episode 15 of the
What?
Advantage podcast. And I'm pretty excited to talk about my experiences in overtraining. And first of all, Matt, where are you and where have you been?
Okay. Well, first, I'm sad to say actually that we missed 1 week. Like we had a really good streak going there for like 14 weeks in a row or something.
14, yep.
That's pretty good. But I was in Canada last week and we had this, nice Airbnb. We were staying at Mont Saint Anne, which is legendary for mountain biking. Did like lots of riding, had races on the weekends. Weather was perfect. But honestly, the internet was so bad that even if I tried calling you, like through the internet, there was such a bad delay that we just couldn't even do the podcast. We tried for like a couple hours
It was
and we couldn't
pretty
do it.
shocking. Yeah.
Yeah, we were in the middle of nowhere though. There was still snow on the ground. So where I am now in the States, East Coast, US, Pennsylvania, there's no snow on the ground. The trees are all bloomed and everything's like nearly summer. But up there in Quebec, there's snow on the ground. The trees were just blooming. It was cold. But yeah, good trip and glad to be back in the States.
All right, cool. Well, I haven't been up to much.
Yeah, I mean, you're in winter. I saw when you got up behind you, you were hanging your jacket. I was like, okay, yeah, it's raining in Rotorua, isn't it?
It's not. It's not a jacket. It's just like just a warm sweatshirt.
Okay, okay. So it's not
To,
cold there at all.
it's cold. It's definitely cold. I mean,
Yeah,
it's winter in New Zealand,
yeah,
so it's not too bad. But yeah, I bike down, so wind chill.
yeah, for sure. So your marathon wasn't that long ago. It was only about 2 weeks ago. So have you been just kind of resting lately?
Almost like 100%. This leads very well into our topic of overtraining. Yeah, like normally I'd be half-ass recovering, where you're like, oh yeah, I'm definitely recovering because I'm not classifying it as training. Um, so, and then you just end up, prolonging your recovery period from 2 weeks to a month. But yeah, I've done, I think, 2 mountain bikes and 2 runs over like just over 2 weeks. So I was
That's pretty
quite
good.
proud of myself. But that was
Been
mainly
hitting the
because I,
chocolate?
I did not want to do it at all.
Yeah. Okay, okay. You needed it then.
Yeah, for sure. I was cooked. I was done. I put in a lot of effort um, into training for the marathon, like a lot. Like I committed to trying to push my limits, like beyond what I trained and thought of like my physical abilities. So yeah, I was happy with that. Not happy with the result, but obviously like it's out of your control, kind of. Um, so yeah, getting back into it, quite motivated to get back into it. Got lined up another 100K race in about 15
Okay.
weeks.
Okay.
So
15 weeks. Plenty of time to get ready after a
yeah,
break.
yeah. Like for that, it's quite a flat race, and um, I'll use it as like a stepping stone towards not sure, something else.
Something like 200 Ks. Just a little bit of a warm up
I don't know
the
about
week
that,
before,
not yet.
maybe. Yeah, you'll have to do the Leadville Trail. Don't they do a 100-mile run?
Yeah, those are like I was like, oh, I need to start like a bucket list of races. And there's the Leadville one, the Western States, the Hard Rock. There's a few. The one in
Yeah.
Australia, that's pretty cool.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Next list. The next one on the list.
Yeah. All right. So overtraining, Matthew, how would you classify it? Because it often gets bantered around like overtraining. Like that's just the blanket term that we use.
Yeah, like someone gets done with a race and they're like, "Oh, I'm overtrained." Like, well, okay, what does that mean? Because when I think about it in a bunch of different levels. And we were talking about this before, and like if you're an athlete and you're trying to get the best out of yourself in your training, like you're always on that fine line between like, normal training and doing the perfect amount and, doing too much. So if you do too much, obviously that you're going to be flirting with overtraining. You can't do it for very long. Otherwise, you're going to dig yourself in a deep hole that you can't get out. But, you still need to push your limits of your training so you can get the best out of yourself. So there's that. So we both were reading, we looked at the research and we're like, okay, what's the best research to read for this podcast? And we settled on a really good review article to read. And in that article, there were 3 different classifications pretty much of overtraining.
Yeah. So it was a great article. I'll link to it actually in the description. So if you want to check that out, it's a overall review of overtraining. But they had 3 classifications. So I guess starting at the most basic would be very acute overtraining, which is more what someone would consider, I don't know, just general fatigue from a big session. So if you went out and did a very long race, 3 to 4 hours or 2 to 4 hour, whatever kind of race, whatever sport you're in, the next day you're going to be pretty stuffed. So that's the smallest, the most acute form of overtraining. And that's just really termed fatigue. And then we get into short-term overtraining or overreaching. And that's the fine line, I think, where you and I, Matt, as coaches are always playing with, where yes, you want to definitely overtrain and in a controlled form so that you can, recover and get that super compensation. And so that can be, I guess a week to 2 weeks kind of thing. And then a week or 2 weeks reduced training load is going to get you back above where you were. And then there's overtraining or chronic overtraining, which is just a continuous weeks and months of overstimulus under recovery.
Yeah, and that's when you find yourself in a hole and you just have no idea what's wrong with you. And we both speak from experience with this because we both have been overtrained.
Yeah, in all forms.
Yeah, but kind of going back to that fatigue thing, that's just going to happen. You might be, those 3 levels of fatigue is the smallest level of overtraining. It's just going to happen. You're going to be tired sometimes from a hard session or a hard event. That's just really part of it. And you could go through a whole season and just have a few of those, and you could perform pretty well at lots of events. And but then that overreaching thing, that's an important thing that we do with our athletes to try and bring the very, very best out of them. And that controlled bit is, I think, the most important part, because we want our overreaching periods to happen because they're so stressful. We want them to happen, 1 or 2 times a year ahead of the most important events.
Yeah. So what are the best ways to identify each? I mean, fatigue, you should have indications of when you're tired or fatigued. Generally, you won't really need to look at any specific, data or metrics or physical sort of cues for something like a really hard session. You should just know I'm doing a really hard session today. Let's say it's a Wednesday and I've got a race on a Saturday or another really big, long weekend training. Then you go, okay, well, if I trained hard on Thursday and Friday, I'm going to be screwed. And then Saturday, Sunday is going to make me even more screwed. You sort of just understand, okay, if I train really hard, I need a rest. Or if I do a race, I'll have a rest. So that's it's hard to, because everyone's going to sort of feel their short-term fatigue in different ways. So you just need to recover after hard sessions. But then what about short-term overtraining, Matt? Because this is for me, what sort of, I guess, happened leading into Rotorua Marathon. There's a very blurred line. There's just a point, and the research that we read said you can just end up in overtraining. It's so smooth and it's such a progression that you don't really know where you are on that spectrum.
Yeah, there's no way to really know. Okay, so yeah, we use our performance indicators, like our, standard performance test. And that's one thing that, my athletes don't really love going out and smashing themselves for a time trial and to see what their power is, every month or every 6 weeks. But it's really good because, as we start to get tired, one of the first things to happen, as we start to get into overreaching, one of the first things to happen is our performance reduces, right? So
Yep.
for me, that's the best way to kind of track that, because once our performance starts to go down, that's a really good indicator for me as the coach to pull back on the training and to bring the athlete into like peak form. So that's why we flirt with that overreaching, and we get into overreaching, and suddenly they're so tired, their performances dip, and they're like, oh, I'm not sure if I want to do this session. And they'll contact me and say, maybe can we change it up, or I'm just haven't been sleeping well. I'm like, okay, this is good timing. This is exactly when we wanted it to happen, because we controlled training throughout the whole season. Let's pull back on the training and bring the very, very best out of you, make that fatigue go away, and keep that fitness really high, and you'll be having your best results all year.
Yep. Yeah, I pretty much use a similar sort of concept. Like, performance is the best indicator, and I just did a video. If you check out my blog, I'll link to it on base training. And one of the things like I incorporated or I always incorporate into base training, which most people would consider like, oh, you just do like a large amount of easy training, zone 1 or 2, and continuously build your fitness. Like that's the goal of it. And this is like a way a lot of people train for like ultra endurance events as well, because there is no high intensity sort of performance outputs in an ultra endurance event. But I incorporate high intensity progress measures like time trials of 10 to 20 minutes within a base phase, because what I've found is like, yes, you can just like cruise along in your base training and be like, oh yeah, I'm gaining fatigue. This is normal. I'm getting fitter. This is all going in the right direction. But because the training's so not necessarily easy, but it's such a low intensity, that fatigue can build up beyond what you realize, because you can still get out there and slog through another 4-hour session, another 2-hour bike ride, another 2-hour run, because you're like, oh, my heart rate's a bit high, but it's not that far off. Like, I don't really need to concentrate or pace or power now. I'm just trying to get large training volumes. And without those like high intensity measures, you're not really having an objective look at like, how much fatigue do I have? Like, I know just in a general sense, for me personally, like around 17 to 17 and a half minutes for a 5K is like, I can do that whenever. So then when I go and do that within a base phase, to do a 5K time trial at, like a park run or local club race, and you're like, I do like an 18 to 19 minutes, like, wow, that was really hard. And even though I'm not like focusing on that top end stuff, like my top end stuff's more like a 16, sub 16 minute. So even giving myself a minute and a half buffer over 5Ks, and I can't even get that. It's like, oh wow, I knew I was tired, but I didn't realize, I was that fatigued.
Yeah, that's one of the things about like we did a video a couple months ago about easy and overtraining. So we kind of talked about both of these topics at the same time. But one of the things that we didn't talk about is that like you actually can get tired by training easy, and you won't notice it unless you go hard, because the only time you start to notice you're gaining fatigue is when you have to start pushing it. And usually it's about like the best indicators like your lactate threshold kind of level, which, we talked about that as well. And that's like the #1 performance indicator for any endurance sport. And, if you're just training easy, you're not going to really hit that level. So if you don't hit that level, you're not going to notice whether you're fatigued or not. So if you're doing, a bunch of easy sessions every week, you might think you have no fatigue, but you're not really going to know unless you have like a high intensity session where you need to actually see how you're going.
Yeah, and this also goes into the that training intensity, because when you're focusing on a base or a non-specific block of training, often we see that gray zone creep in. We've got that zone 1, zone 2, and then there's like that gray zone 3 where it's like kind of anaerobic, kind of aerobic. There's no real benefit. But when you start training there and you're like, oh yeah, I'm definitely getting faster, but what you're doing is quickly building fatigue. And so when you're like, oh, I'll do some hill intervals or something, and you're like, oh, they were a bit off, but I'm in base phase, so it's kind of understandable. If you start to ignore that and you don't go like hard or easy, and you're going like somewhere in the middle, and then you kind of like, we've been there, you just fool yourself.
Yeah. I'm smiling to myself now because like these things have like rang true to me since I started biking. And like, because we talked about it before, and like I don't really like, I ride a lot, but I don't like, and I'll sometimes do like, I'll test the structured sessions that I make for my athletes and things like that. But besides that, I don't train. But I ride, sometimes I ride with people slower than me, and sometimes I ride with people faster than me. I always track what I'm doing. But sometimes I even trick myself into saying like, oh, well, I'm not training, I'm not really that tired, even though I'm looking at the same exact data that I'd be looking at for one of my athletes. Yeah, it's just funny because, with us being self-coached, I don't know, maybe we should coach each other or something like that, right?
Yeah, I have thought about that, but I also feel like it could, ruin our friendship.
Yeah, that's true. Well, yeah. I mean, it could make it, way better, or just totally ruin it. It would change the dynamic of the podcast, though, that's for sure.
Yeah, maybe for this 100K, you should coach me.
Yeah. I mean, we could, yeah. I don't know much about running, but maybe
I
it'd
could
be a
write
good
the
training.
program and you could monitor my my metrics.
Yeah, okay. That's the hard part, actually. Yeah. But yeah, you could, maybe you could train me for an event.
Yeah, a running one.
No way.
Oh, what?
No way. No way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Well, you do have some good beginner running programs.
Yeah. I got you.
Which
5 weeks to 5K. You could get that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm an absolute beginner.
Um,
We should talk about it though offline. We'll talk about it offline.
So then what about the chronic stuff?
Wow.
We've sort of talked about the lack of, once you start to notice a decrease in your performance. Now, because what I've seen, what I've done, what you've done, what most people do is they see this, like, they think they've just been sort of training easy, nothing really specific. The odd hard session with your club, your bunch ride, club run, or whatever. But otherwise, they think like you, I haven't been training. I'm using like air quotes with my hands for those listening. Yeah, they haven't been training, so then they go do a race and like, oh man, that's way shit.
Smoked.
Yeah, I should train harder.
Yeah, it's so then like, and this is the most important thing that we're going to talk about today, because this happens all the time, and it's mostly like people fall into the trap because they don't have some sort of measure that they're going off of to know what's actually happening. They just go into an event, and I've done it, you've done it. We go into an event, and we're like, I've been training easy. The event didn't go that well. I'm going to start adding in more intervals so I can get faster.
Yep. And then we begin the downward trend.
Yep. Because then you start adding more intervals, and then you get more tired, and then you perform worse, and then you add more intervals, and you get more tired, and you perform worse. And, if you say it that way, it seems kind of silly, right? Like, oh, well, you probably should have known. But, but that's not the case. Like, as athletes, like, we're looking at it like like we're so absorbed into what we're doing every day. We're not looking at it like, oh, maybe I should lay off a little bit because I'm too tired. So the most common trap is to fall into a trap of the cycle of poor performance and hard training over and over and over and over until you absolutely can't do anything. Maybe you develop chronic fatigue, which is horrendous. And then you get burnt out and you quit. And it happens all the time.
Or injury.
Yeah, especially in runners. Cyclists, they have to ride like a lot to get an overuse injury. But definitely in runners, like it can happen more quickly, can't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah, very quickly. So there are so then yeah, we get into that overtraining situation, and there are a lot more cues to notice when that's happening. So if for some people it's like they'll get their niggles, their injuries, especially in running. And then swimming, you know, the shoulder soreness, the overuse kind of things. Cycling, yeah, it is quite hard because there is like it's a reasonably natural movement and there's no impacts. Whereas swimming, it's an unnatural kind of movement of the shoulder, so you can get overuse. Some people get those injuries, like myself. I touch wood, like I don't get injured. I don't really. I've never had any major injuries or setbacks physically, except for when Sam Shaw took me on a mountain bike ride and I broke my shoulder blade.
Yeah.
But then I just jumped on the bike and started doing Zwift.
Yeah.
Like for me, I just get so tired. So that's the way my body reacts, is that I'll just get more and more tired. And then the hard part becomes like differentiating that tiredness between like your acute sort of tiredness, potentially maybe tiredness from the work that I've been doing. And then like, am I just being a pussy? Like, do I need to, like, I'm trying to train hard. I'm trying to like, you know, be a better athlete, like get out the door. Like I'm motivated. So then you get that blurred sort of like, oh yeah, well, I know that in a couple of weeks I have a rest week. So I'm tired, but I'm meant to be tired. I'll push through. I'll keep pushing through. And then like my sleep deteriorates. I start to crave sugar. What else? Those are the main things. And then there are like those performance sort of decrements, but then I can justify those by the large training volume I'm doing and the rest I have coming up.
When you're doing it yourself, you just have this like really biased outlook on what's going on, because like you have this plan in your head and you know exactly how you feel, and you can justify these different feelings based on, you know, maybe you walk to the grocery store and you're carrying 2 bags of milk and they're super heavy, and that's why you're
2 bags of milk.
Well, I don't know, you know, gains, you know,
more like a Gatorade.
Yeah, like piles of Gatorade and chocolate, and obviously not Powerade. We talked about that one, but yeah. So like you can just make something up to yourself to make yourself feel better, and like no, I'm fine. But you know, those indicators, you know, that you mentioned, like performance. So if you have an objective measure, like a performance test that you do all the time, and if you track your sleep, like your sleep is going to be really poor once you start to get overtrained. For me, that's like dead giveaway. Like my sleep, like normally when I put my head on the pillow, I'm asleep. But if it takes me a long time to fall asleep, I know I'm getting tired. My mood will change too. Like I won't want to like get out and ride. Like I love getting out and riding, but if I've been doing too much, I'm not going to want to do it. And I'll get grumpy, and maybe I'll like, you know, get mad at my girlfriend for like, you know, making a bad curry or something for dinner. No, never bad curry. But you know, it's like mood is another one, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
That definitely changes. And that's one thing that I did. We tracked that in a study that I did for you. We tracked, it's a super easy profile of mood state. You just like say how you're feeling. And like, I don't know how they get the numbers.
About 50 to 100 questions. And it's like, you know, I can't remember if it's like disagree, strongly disagree, like agree, strongly agree kind of thing. And it's like anger, I don't know, like passiveness, like, and just
Yeah.
all of those questions, and they're
We'll
all
link one. We'll link one to the podcast.
yeah, yeah, you can do it. Yeah, there's heaps online, and they'll give you the score, your profile or mood state score.
And that
And then
lines up really well with being overtrained. Like if your mood state goes down, like it usually indicates that like something's not right with, you know, the rest of your body.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I think we're sort of structured that
Yeah, well,
overtraining cues. It's going to be different for everyone, but I think that, like with anything, if you track a trend over time, that's where it's going to be most obvious. And I did a video. It's on Facebook, tracking my. I looked back at the track of my fatigue freshness curve in Strava. So a lot of people have Strava because, you know, Strava,
yeah.
and they have a good feature if you pay for the premium one, and it shows you don't need to be super experienced in data analysis or anything. It kind of just shows you like, this is your fatigue, this is your freshness, and this is your fitness. If you see your like fatigue going up and up and up, and you feel crap, you're like, oh, okay, I should rest.
Yeah.
And so you can see on mine, so the video I did, I went through and I showed like, okay, here's my base phase. I just built fitness and fatigue in a controlled manner. Then I had a break. Then I did a block of like marathon specific training. Then I had a break. And you can see like fitness and fatigue, and then freshness, they all like, you know, fitness and fatigue go up and freshness goes down. And then I rest, and they, you know, the lines sort of go over each other. You're like, cool. And then it gets to the last part, just like 3 weeks before the race, and boom, I got really tired, and I knew I was tired, and I was like, I'll just do this session and then it's done. Like, then my training is done. And it was the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, I needed to, potentially I did too much in that block, whatever it was, but I knew where I was, and looking back on it, like, I should have just stopped. Like, what was one extra session going to get me, in terms of my performance? Like you think that's the thing. Like, that's what's going to make the huge difference. That's what's going to take 10 minutes off my time.
Yeah, but
You're
it's
like,
not. It's
yeah,
not. It's what you've done in this like 6 months leading up to it. It's not like that one session. It's
my
what you've
biggest
done
ever, like most dedicated block of running ever. Like, I averaged over 100 Ks for like 20 weeks. You know, like why I thought that a few sessions and runs over like a 5-day period was going to make or break it. And then even like going into the final couple of weeks, I was like, well, now I'll just chill out, and I've just got 2 like tweaker sessions. They were still reasonable. It still like just kept adding that fatigue. But I was like, well, I need to do them, otherwise
I'll suck.
Yeah, it's just and
well,
I could justify it. I could.
Yeah.
But it's hard when you're in it, you know, like, I wasn't ridiculously tired. I was sleeping well. I was monitoring my sleep. I was craving quite a bit of sugar. But then like, I was at the end of a training block, so it was really hard to, and I was hitting my times in the sessions. Like, I killed the last session. So that makes it hard, where you're like, so I was on the overreaching, but I just hadn't timed it right. Like, so now in the future, I need to know, like, actually, I need to be here 3 weeks out, not 2 weeks out. Because going into the race, I felt like I was almost there, just almost. Like, my time wasn't horrendous. Like, it was just a bit off, and I was just, I just needed like a few more days, like another week, and it would have been right up there.
Yeah. I mean, the way you talk about it, you make it sound like it was a disaster, but you actually did have a pretty like reasonable performance, just not exactly where you had a good performance. It just wasn't where you really expected it to be for going above and beyond.
Like what my training had indicated. It was as it would, like, when you look back and you're like, okay, I was just I was in some form of overtraining. Like, I was in that short term overreaching. I was in there, and that showed. You know, that would be, if that was one of the performance indicators, it would be like, oh yeah, you're just a little off. That's we need a little bit more rest. Unfortunately, that just happened to be the race.
Yeah, and 1 week actually really could have made a big difference as well.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah. Well, you know, next year I reckon just send me an email, matt@mtbphd.com, and we'll schedule a consultation, sort you right out for next year. How's
Okay.
that sound? I'll give you a discount. Mention that you heard it on the podcast, and I'll give you a discount.
All right. Thank you, matt@mtbphd.com.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah.
We had planned to talk about our experiences, but I think I just jumped the gun and
No,
really
that's
ran
fine.
through mine.
That's
My
fine.
short-term one anyway. Long-term one was a lot dumber than that.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, mine's pretty dumb too. Do you want to hear it?
Yeah, go.
Okay. Yeah. So this is like why I think like for us to talk about overtraining, it's pretty good because we've been there. Like we know exactly what it's like. We try and avoid it with all our athletes, and we look at for those same exact indicators. You know, like those exact things that you're talking about are those the exact things that I'd be looking for with my athletes. And you know, that's what the coach does is says, okay, it's time to pull back. And like one of the problems with this whole overtraining stuff, like we read these articles and stuff, these scientific articles, and the research is a bit shaky on like why does overtraining happen? What are the exact like biochemical indicators to catch it before it does happen? Like that research just doesn't really exist. Like no one really knows why exactly it happens or what the magic number is to make overtraining happen.
Well, we read that article from 1993, and we thought it was from like last year. Like,
yeah, I thought someone wrote it yesterday.
That's how far we've progressed in terms of our knowledge of different indicators, but they're so varied and so different for so many different sports and athletes. It's like you're still like it's 2019. We're still overtraining.
Yeah, well, yeah. Sadly, I mean, it'd be scary though. Like if everyone could get it perfect, wouldn't it?
It would.
Like everyone would be like absolutely flying, and you'd have to be like super dedicated. Like so, in the future, when like the world's run by robots, and like we have all this time to like be training, and we can get it exactly perfect, it's just going to be about genetics. So I guess we'd be out of jobs, wouldn't we?
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah, that's at least 2020s. So we got some time. But yeah, like I guess I never really had a coach like properly. So I was pretty much either overtrained or undertrained at all times. So if we go back in the day, in the early 2000s when 24-hour racing was quite cool and like ultra endurance mountain biking, I was doing a little bit of that.
To be fair, you weren't cool, so this is kind of skewed.
No. I mean, I did like predate the bum bag. Like I was running a bum bag with my tools in it at bike races before like it was a cool thing to do. You know, so 2004. It's cool now. That's why I say that. So, you know, I'm just a bit before my time. But you know, I really had no way to like guide my training. And this is in the time where like you could take a heart rate monitor with you, and like it makes me feel old if I say it like this, but it wasn't that long ago. Like same heart rate strap, same watch, but you couldn't download it.
Yeah,
like you could only see it in real time, right? So if you're like going like blasting down a downhill, you have no idea what your heart rate is because you're not looking at it. If you're going up a technical climb on your mountain bike, you don't know what your heart rate is because like you're not looking at power meters. Barely existed. Like only if you're a millionaire did you have one. The pros didn't even run them because no one knew what it meant.
Yeah.
And like I just would dig myself into these deep holes of overtraining. So one of my problems was like I loved doing long, easy rides, and I pretty much had that dialed. Like I could go out and do a long, easy ride and eat like a bunch of donuts. Like I could do that whenever I had the time to do it, and I'd be all good. But I really hated doing like aerobic intervals, like you know, like tempo threshold kind of thing. But I really loved sprinting, so I would pretty much do long rides and sprints. And and that's kind of like those are really good things to do when you're training for any different kind of mountain biking. But I did way too many sprints. So I'd come into the season, into the mountain bike season, having done like a huge base, and I'd get into the first couple races, and we were racing a lot, and my first couple races would go really well, and I'd be thinking to myself, oh, this is awesome, because now I'm going to start doing my sprints, and I'm just going to get way better. So I'd finish a race on the weekend, come home, do my sprints, race again, and the race would go okay, right? So a couple weeks, and the races would progressively get a little bit worse. Long rides, races, sprints, long rides, races, sprints. And I'd get into the middle of the summer, and I would just be going backwards. And I just didn't understand. So the only answer to me was to do more sprints, right?
Yeah, I know.
It makes sense. It makes absolute sense. Like, if you are slow, you need to go harder. And like, I couldn't really put two and two together because I didn't understand what was happening. So I'd look at my heart rate, and I'd be doing like this all out, like 5-minute effort, which, now that we understand power, we know that's not a sprint. And I'd hit it as hard as I possibly could. And, I'd be looking at my heart rate and be like, normally I can get it over 200, but now it's at like 170. I guess I'm not trying hard enough. Right. So I'd try harder. And then, I'd finish the session and be like, yeah, well, I went pretty hard. That should be good. And it was just a downward spiral for about a year. And I found myself at the national championships, pretty much out the back, was going nowhere up the hills. And pretty much for a really long time, I just couldn't ride, and I didn't understand it. I thought I was sick. So I was going to all these specialists. I went to a chronic disease specialist. I went to like this weird, like homeopathic, like specialist. We just thought I was sick. They thought I had like some weird virus. And then they checked my heart, and they found something, like I had this same blockage that you told me you had, a bundle branch blockage, which just kind of means you have a developed heart from training. And we thought that was the problem. But, it was a really sad cycle where I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't performing well in the thing that I really wanted to do well at. And I just got really depressed, and stayed that way for a long time until I was able to rest and recuperate and get back to where I wanted to be. And that probably took, a few years all up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, mine doesn't sound too dissimilar. So yeah, like I was at university. I was like pretty much 20 years old when I started triathlon, and coming from rugby, like you train hard, team sport, you just sort of do hard things. And then, so, I mean, this is most people's understanding of things. You're like, well, I want to get faster, so I'll train harder, so I'd come back from a run and just be absolutely wrecked, just, and I was like, good, like nailed it. And initially that was like not such a bad, like it wasn't great, but it wasn't such a bad thing because I wasn't training very often. Like my runs were 20, 30 minutes kind of thing. I'd sort of like try and get a 5K loop and just try and do it as hard as I could. And then like I was so atrocious at swimming that I couldn't really go hard for very long, so I'd have to stop at the end of the pool for a couple minutes. It's a perfect interval training. And then on the bike, yeah, just like I needed to, so the sprint triathlon's a 750 meter swim, a 20K bike, and a 5K run. So like do a little bit of a warm up, ride 20Ks as hard as I could. And then generally what would happen, I remember now, is like I'd get so tired, I'd just give up at like 10 minutes. But I'd have a rest and then try again for the next 10 minutes. And all I was looking at was speed, and I hope we don't sound condescending to people who are like, oh shit, this is me in a nutshell. It's just, we've just been through this. So now, like, I mean, this is 10 years on after like 10 years of like studying and research and working with athletes. It just looks silly, but I guess it's potentially what people are going through now. But
Yeah, I
anyway,
think until someone has like there's no like it makes sense. Like you go hard, you get faster, right? No pain, no gain. Like that's a brand slogan, isn't it? And like I think we're conditioned to think that like that's the way to get faster. Like the only way to get better is to absolutely suffer.
CrossFit.
Um, yeah, the CrossFit way. But yeah, we don't like. I don't think anyone's going to take this. Hopefully, not take this the wrong way because we're just talking about ourselves. Like this is exactly what we've done,
Yeah.
and like once we got the education to like understand what to do and like how it actually works, what's actually going on in the body, like that's when we made the change.
Yeah. So, and then I went through that for like my first year kind of thing. And it was because I wasn't training huge amounts and I was still drinking a lot at uni. So, I was pretty hungover for quite a bit. So I'd missed training a lot.
Obviously.
And, and then I was like, just, I don't know, my personality and like I was doing biochemistry and there was a sports science sort of paper in there. So I got a heart rate monitor. I was like, oh, heart rate monitor training. All right. And this is what I'm going through with a lot of people now that I absolutely love heart rate training. I was like, this must be wrong. Like, I can barely run that fast. Like, normally I can run quite fast and in my like normal, like general 30-minute to 1 hour run. This heart rate monitor says I need to run way slower. Nah. And then I sort of like, I kept noting it down in my training diary. I had a notebook and it was, yeah, it was like, 170, 180 average. Like, because, you couldn't upload them or whatever, but it'll give you the average. And yeah, and so then I was like adding some more, and then I started training with some of the elite guys. One of them now is like, well, he always was Mike Phillips, but he just won Ironman New Zealand. So this is like, 8-9 years ago, I started training with this guy, and he was like better than me. So I was like, oh yeah, well, I should train more when they're not training. Like I'll do their training with them, like our group stuff, and then I'll go and do some more. Or like I'll bike to running and then do running. And yeah, that it initially made me better. It's definitely made me a better athlete. Until it kind of just made me, I don't know, tired and plateau. So then I was in like this position where, yeah, I was getting overtrained, but I still wasn't doing a huge volume. Because I was so new to the sport, I thought 10 to 15 hours was massive. When in, what it kind of is, but on the scheme of things, like I was a student, I wasn't really doing anything. I was sort of able to maintain that, but I was in the position as well where, you're like, oh, I did this session, so that means I should be able to race at least better than that. So now you have an over expectation of yourself. You go to the race, you don't do so well, train harder, and so then you're in that vicious cycle you talked about. And yeah, I pretty much just sort of like was doing that for a couple of years. And before I met Professor Steve Stannard, came up to do my honors and sport and exercise. It's like, oh yeah, slow down. So I'd sort of started understanding that. So got out of that overtraining kind of part. And but then I got more attached to like doing more and avoiding those hard sessions, or making that excuse that, well, that didn't go so well because like I was only in base phase, like because I had a lot of fatigue built up from all the large volume I was doing. And I was doing it still like slightly a bit too hard, not easy enough. And yeah, I sort of like I'd do a race, I'd be like, I need to stop. So I'd stop and then get straight back into another huge block of training. And then one race would go well and the next one would go like, and then I was like, that means I'm doing everything right. I should train harder. And then it would go worse. And somehow through that, I like got this one race really, really good. This half Ironman. I came third up in Auckland. And I was like, yes, I can be a professional. That's it. Like, I'm going to finish studying. I won't have that stress. Go to Australia with a couple of my mates. I'm going to train to be a professional. And that was when the worst chronic training of my life happened. We landed at like Kieran McPherson, who's been on the podcast. He's, very successful professional athlete now. Went over, landed at like, I don't know, say 5 p.m. that night. Had to like figure out our way from the airport to the place we'd rented. Next morning, 5 a.m. up, like 6K swim set. And that was just from there, it was all go. Any of the professionals there that were like, do you want to come for a ride? I was like, yep. And I'll try and rip their legs off. And like any run, I was like, yeah, I'm going to do. I just built up. So I was like, here's my first week. This is what the pros do. This is what Javier Gomez does. It was like 30K swim. It was like 500Ks on the bike and 100 plus Ks of running. I was like, yep, sweet. I'll start at like, keep the 30K swimming and like the 10 hours of biking. I'll have that as my standard, and I'll try and progress my running because, progression.
Yeah.
So I started like 100Ks of running. Then I did 120Ks of running. Third week, I did 140Ks running. And you'd think, I don't even know how I did this. And you'd think I'd be like just doing it all easy. I was wrecking myself. I was doing like 5K intervals. I was like doing massive tempo runs off the bike, like race pace, like trying to do 10K in like, I don't know, 35 minutes, like off the bike. And then I did this 10, at the end of that, I had the Gold Coast 10K, which is massive, like really big event. I was like, man, I'm going to run so fast. I've been doing so much training. And it was like the worst run of my life. It was atrocious. It was so much slower than all of my training. I felt like I could barely even finish. And I was like, man, I need a rest. And I have this in my diary. I need a rest, right? So I was doing about 30 hours of training, and we had no car. So I was actually biking to swimming and everything. So it's probably doing another 50 to 100 Ks of commuting. And so I look back on my rest week, and my rest week is like 20 Ks of swimming, about 300 Ks of biking, and about 80 Ks of running.
Oh boy.
And oh man, from there, and I started to like eat a lot of sugar, crave sugar a lot just to keep myself up. I was drinking a lot of energy drinks and coffee with a lot of sugar, and I wasn't sleeping very well. I felt really bad about myself. And man, yeah, it took me a very long time to dig myself out of that hole because I never stopped. I just didn't stop. I just thought I'll just keep doing less, and then I'd still want to race. So then I'd try and pick it up. And it's just this vicious cycle for about 2 years of like this, like training really well and then going, okay, that's the indication that I've recovered. I'll push on. And then it's just like,
So it, like, that's not a unique story. Like your story and my story, they sound
unfortunately it's not, because
similar.
it, like looking back on it, it really took like, like including that block when I was in Australia, like, that was like 2.5 years to get my physical capabilities back to where it's like, I could do whatever I wanted.
So if an athlete comes to you, which a lot of times if an athlete's going through something like this, they're not going to seek help, just because they do think like you feel a lot of control of what you're doing, and you think you're doing it right. So like I was thinking, well, why would I ask someone? I'm not doing too much. But if someone came to you and they showed you exactly your training plan, and that was what their training is, what would you say?
This has happened, and it's sort of like I try and break it down for them. What I'm generally able to do is show the inconsistencies in their training. So that was like, it was a big realization, I guess, for me, which helped get me out of it. Is like, what can I do every week? Like, not what can I think I do, like what I think I can do. So I looked and I was like, man, over the last 6 weeks, I've averaged 12 hours a week of training. And that was either like 5 to 7 hours or 20 to 25 hours. So it's like that kind of thing. And I say, look, why don't we just try this? Why don't we just try 10 hours a week? Let's just see how you go. We'll do a little time trial at the start. We'll do one at the end. You track your mood or something, and so that's really how, like, I try to explain the physiology if they're interested. But otherwise, like, I have like a 2 to 4 week reset that I go through, and then if the athlete's willing and trusting, they're generally like they'll do it, and they'll be like, wow, I feel a lot better. So that's sort of, what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, if someone came to me and they showed me that, I would really encourage them to have a rest. And I think it would be a hard thing to convince someone to do.
Well, like, if I think about that time and not wanting to get a coach, I didn't want someone to tell me I was doing something wrong and that I had to do less training.
Yeah. Same. I was in the same boat.
Like, what if they're only going to tell me I can do, 10 hours? I'm fine. I know what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the very best thing to do is like, and this is why we have like set rest periods, like, because we know we're eventually going to get to that point at some time in the season, of being, kind of borderline overtraining. And we don't want that to happen in the important part of the season. So that's why we have a total reset and we take time off. And, like what I tell my athletes to do is just lock the bike away and don't even look at it. And like something like that is the very first thing I would recommend, is just absolutely have a break for, at least 3 weeks. Don't even look at the bike.
Yeah, I find that hard, like a harder kind of convincing. That's where, depending on the level of overtraining, that's like the last thing they want to hear. It's like to do less, and maybe there's something more going on as to why they're training so much. But I find it's to reduce a heavily reduced training load, and adding things in that make a training plan look fairly full. If you put yoga in there, if you put like, I know, like for swimming, you can use stretch cords. Like, you start to add that stuff into a program, which is 10, 15 minutes. That foam roller stuff you don't believe in, like, put that sort of kind of stuff in there. It's like, wow, I've got a lot on this week. I've got like 3 sessions every day, and each of them is like 15 minutes in duration.
And it's no effort.
Yeah. Shh.
Yeah, I mean, something like that sounds really good, especially for an athlete that's super motivated and they are performing poorly and they keep getting worse. They're not going to want to just do nothing in the day. Like, because you've spent months and months and maybe even years filling your entire day with lots of exercise and going too hard and feeling smoked at the end of the day. So in my experience, what athletes kind of go through is they go through this period of actually even feeling worse, and they start to feel even more tired because suddenly they really reduce their volume of exercise, and they get like really sleepy throughout the day during this kind of rest period. But then it takes a few weeks, and then you get back into the training, start out easy, you do some performance testing, and you start to feel better, things start to go better, and then you just build consistently and slowly from there.
That rest period, because we're, in a basic level, once you begin to get overtrained, you're in this kind of chronic state of stimulus or overstimulus. So that's why you struggle to sleep, like your catecholamines, like your adrenaline and stuff. Like when you have a coffee, that kind of, all those hormones are up. So in overtraining, they're either up and you're like on and you struggle to sleep, or you've burnt out all those receptors and all those hormones and you're down, way down. Again, all you want to do is sleep. And that's very chronic overtraining. But so when you start to train, when you stop training, all of those hormones, they start to reset. And because you've overstimulated the receptors and stuff, it'd be like if you went from 7 coffees a day to none. It's that kind of response where you're like, I feel like crap, because you now have, like, you're actually recovering. And so your body's like, all right, I'm taking this because you don't give me any of this. So let's stop. And that's why you can feel really crappy if you even just in a day off or a couple of days off, and you think, oh, I feel better when I exercise. Sort of a short-term loss, long-term gain kind of thing.
Absolutely, yeah. It's all, and that's what the coach can help with, is the long-term outlook, right? Because when we're doing our own kind of programs, we're just looking, we're trying to look long-term, but we're mostly looking short-term because we're in the moment, we're feeling it all the time. But I like those analogies of the body says this, like the body says, "Oh, give me rest," and things like that. I like those, and sometimes I almost think of it as almost like a withdrawal kind of symptoms. It's obviously it's a lot different if someone's going through like proper withdrawal, but from like drug dependency or something like that, pretty serious. But I would imagine like the way you see it depicted in the movie, it's kind of seems similar when you take yourself away from exercise and you just feel really bad for a little bit. But it's all about the long term. If you want to stick with it, stay motivated, and keep getting better.
Yeah, and that leaves, I guess, to a bit of a plug for my endurance training hub that I've put together. So I've found this. I have a firm belief that like if an athlete is able to, like us, like we look back on it and we're like, oh, that's so silly. Like what were we doing? But the fact is we didn't know. So it seemed right. And that's why I created, I wanted to become a coach, and also created this like big resource where I've put it like, you can read books and things, but the books are, I guess, like old school. So I made this like,
those anymore?
Pardon?
Do they even make books anymore?
Maybe ebooks.
Yeah. Okay.
This like hub, like the endurance training hub, where you log in and like I've put articles and videos and everything, like so you can get a training plan. Like there's over 50 odd training plans in there that I've put together around this recovery and base training and all that kind of stuff. But also there's all the information. So you're like, why is this training all so much easier than what I was doing? Why are there no interval sessions? Like it's all like, oh, I feel like crap. Oh, there's a video on this. Like, oh, Will's done this, or the live Q&As and stuff on the Facebook page. It's like, yes, this is my job, but I really just want to educate the public and show you like you can enjoy exercise and improve your performance. Like if you're willing and able to understand what's going on in terms of the physiology, and that, like if you saw my Instagram or Facebook posts, like you don't need to train hard all the time.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be really hard. Like you can improve like consistently through like a well-structured, easy training plan.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a hard sell on that style of training until someone actually tries it. And I sometimes have a hard time convincing, people like downhill mountain bikers that easy training is really going to benefit them. But yeah, once someone tries it and they just let it happen and, just do it, and they see the benefits of, training properly. Then they're totally sold on it.
Yeah. And it is hard. Like I had someone, who's been on my training plan on the, in the endurance training hub, and is like, oh, I don't know if those heart rate zones are right. It seems really slow, like, I don't know. I think I should probably run a bit faster. She's like, and saying that, I felt amazing, like so much better. I've been sleeping better. I haven't had anywhere as much as fatigue. And I did a 4-minute PB on my last race.
And it's still a hard sell.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because it's still slow. Like you need to, it's like, oh, well, shouldn't I be, doing it harder? And yeah, you can integrate harder sessions for those athletes that are like, I need that in my system. I need to be training hard. Yeah, it is a hard sell.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess, my advice would be, just try it. Like try like an easier training program. If you're feeling any of these symptoms like reduced motivation, poor sleep, poor performance, like your performances have gone down, weight gain, sugar cravings, anything like that, just try changing your training and try those easy training sessions and stick with it for a really long time. Measure your performance and see how it helps you.
Yeah, I think that's the best advice. And like there's a lot of like mine the Endurance Training Hub. You've got your training plans, Matt. Jump on a training plan. Like we talked about that in our you know was it gadget guide or money spending guide? Like for under $50 to get a training plan. So you're like, okay, you can use it or not. It's sort of like it's not a huge investment to like a race that's going to cost you $100+. You're like, okay, I'll check this training sort of thing out, and you can use them again and again if you really like it. Just so you don't have to feel yourself so accountable to all of your training. Otherwise, like Matt and I did, you're going to end up just pushing beyond what you need to.
Yeah, definitely. Well, hey, I think that's really good information for any kind of athlete. So I think that was a cool one. So I'll look forward to the feedback, and everyone, like, I've been really happy with all the feedback that we've gotten from the podcast. So if you have any comments on this one, just send it through to us on Instagram or Facebook when you see us out on the trails. Just let us know how you like it and what you want to hear next.
Yeah, that is. We have been getting some good response and really appreciate it. So
yeah, that's why we do it.
I see other podcasts I listen to, they say leave us a review on iTunes. But then I just saw that Apple's getting rid of iTunes, so I don't know really where you're gonna leave a review, but just like tell your mate. So like, hey, listen to this real cool podcast.
Yeah, these cool dudes.
Yeah, might cut that part out. All right, Matt, have a good week.
All right.
And I'll catch you next Wednesday.
See ya.